Welcome to the Colleague Experience episode. Today we're diving into bold insights, innovative experimentation, and groundbreaking leadership strategies that redefine success. In this episode, we'll unravel the concept of black swan events and explore how leaders can adapt to unexpected disruptions with flexibility and foresight. Ready to transform your perspective? Let's dive in. A black swan is a term for phenomena that were considered impossible until the moment they suddenly revealed themselves as very real. The original black swans were discovered in Australia in the 17th century, after they had been unknown to the Western world until then. The person responsible for the modern flourishing of the black swan concept is Nassim Nicholas Taleb, who wrote a bestseller by this name. Taleb, a Lebanese Christian whose family fled Lebanon following the civil war that broke out there in the 1970s, describes in his book's introduction how the situation in Lebanon, which had been a relatively modern, secular, and Western country, began to change due to demographic shifts. He tells of family members who remained in Lebanon and continued to tell themselves that the changes happening in Lebanese society were temporary and had exhausted themselves, that things couldn't possibly get worse. And then they did get worse. And worse still. And even worse, Taleb brings his family's story and Lebanon's situation in the 70s as an example of an unexpected disruption event. A black swan. To deal with disrupted reality, we prepare contingency plans. But what are these plans based on? They're based on what we know. On our experience. The problem is that this experience is only useful when the rules of the game in the new, disrupted reality remain close to the rules from before the change. When that's the case, our experience may indeed serve us well. But often the situation is different. Taleb's story, which is essentially the familiar tale of the frog that slowly boils in a pot of gradually heating water, illuminates our human difficulty in catching dramatic changes when they happen gradually. One reason for this is that from an evolutionary perspective, our brains only came down from the trees yesterday and aren't adapted to absorb the dizzying pace of change in our era. Our brain's working assumption is that the world changes at a linear pace. Since the change between yesterday and today can't be that large, we prefer to open the same drawers where we keep the tools that worked for us in the past. Another reason for the slowly boiling frog phenomenon is that the gradual and relatively slow nature of change allows us to make adjustments to the narrative we form about the situation, giving us enough time to build a good enough excuse not to act. Consider what we witnessed in the software industry during the early days of cloud computing. Many established enterprise software companies continued operating under the assumption that their traditional, on-premise licensing models would remain dominant. We watched as these organizations made incremental adjustments to their narratives, convincing themselves that cloud adoption was just a temporary trend for small startups, not serious enterprises. Each quarter, as cloud competitors gained more market share, these companies found new explanations for why their traditional approach was still valid. The water temperature kept rising, but they kept adjusting to it, rather than recognizing the fundamental shift occurring in their industry. In another part of his book, Taleb tells the story of a turkey in the days before Thanksgiving. Our protagonist receives a good portion of food each day, so he'll grow and fatten up. With each passing day, he becomes accustomed to the situation. If he were human, he would assume, based on his experience, that what happened yesterday would probably happen tomorrow as well. The turkey's experience serves him faithfully until Thanksgiving arrives, and then, in one blow, reality changes. Instead of receiving another portion of food, he's sent where all Thanksgiving turkeys go. It's important to notice the distinction between the turkey and the frog. While both stories end in the same place, on someone's plate, their disruption differs in character. The frog experiences long, gradual disruption, where at each stage she has time to adjust to the new situation, so she doesn't act to adapt herself to the change. In contrast, our turkey's disruption is immediate. He simply doesn't have time to adapt to the change. If in the case of slow emerging disruption like the boiling frog, there was still an opportunity to prepare for change, in the case of sharp, rapid change like the turkey, that possibility doesn't exist. We wake up one day and discover that reality has simply changed beneath our feet. We saw this turkey-like disruption unfold dramatically in the pharmaceutical industry when COVID-19 emerged. One day, biotech companies that had been focused on their traditional drug development pipelines suddenly found themselves in a completely transformed landscape. Companies like Moderna, which had been working on mRNA technology for years without major commercial success, overnight became central players in a global health crisis. Meanwhile, established pharmaceutical giants found their carefully planned research priorities and market assumptions completely upended. There was no gradual adjustment period. The industry rules changed in a matter of weeks, not years. When something becomes disrupted, meaning when something doesn't behave according to our expectations, we can either try to force it into the existing drawers we already have, or we can build new drawers for it. The default choice for most people, most of the time, is the first option, what Kahneman calls System 1, thinking in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow. This behavior likely developed because of its survival advantages. If we see a creature walking on four legs with spotted fur and sharp teeth, we immediately find the appropriate drawer in our brain, labeled tiger. From that drawer, we quickly pull out the protocol for behavior when encountering a tiger, which reads, dangerous, run away. However, the thing about disruptions is that sometimes they create situations for which there is no appropriate drawer. And if we try to use the experience we've accumulated, we'll act contrary to the new rules of the game. To summarize, we are creatures who think within fixed, predetermined frameworks. Even if reality continues to show us with signs and wonders that the framework we've chosen doesn't fit and we need to build a new drawer, our tendency will be to continue thinking within the existing frameworks we've created for ourselves. You might be thinking of the word conception right now, but reality keeps becoming disrupted at an increasing pace, which essentially requires us to be able to build new thinking frameworks constantly, and this isn't simple or even natural for most of us. One way to deal with the need to constantly build new thinking frameworks is to learn not to become attached to existing frameworks, to know how to give them up quickly, not to cling to what worked in the past, but to part ways and build something new in its place. For some of us, this will come more easily, and for others it will be like parting the Red Sea. Either way, one of the important leadership features for those leading organizations at this time is the ability to release their grip on previous assumptions and perceptions. The agility of the organization depends on the flexibility of those who lead it. And the path to flexibility for leaders begins with their ability to courageously and honestly re-examine the assumptions and perceptions through which they see reality. This becomes particularly challenging because our success often reinforces our attachment to the frameworks that brought us that success. When we've built our careers and organizations around certain mental models, questioning those models feels like questioning our very identity. Yet this is exactly what the accelerating pace of change demands from us. The most effective leaders we encounter are those who have learned to hold their strategic assumptions lightly, constantly testing them against emerging realities rather than defending them against contradictory evidence. They understand that in a world of increasing black swan events, the ability to rapidly shift mental models isn't just a nice-to-have skill. It's essential for survival and continued relevance. That's a wrap for today's podcast. We've explored how black swan events, like those described by Nassim Nicholas Taleb, challenge us to adapt and let go of outdated frameworks. reminding leaders to stay flexible in the face of unexpected changes. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this episode with your friends and colleagues so they can also stay updated on the latest news and gain powerful insights. Stay tuned for more updates.